Unsettling experience in the Arizona desert. This took place almost 25 years ago, but is still just as vivid in my mind all these years later. A buddy and I like to go shooting out in the desert. Arizona is a very gun-friendly state, and at least back then, if you were a mile outside the city or away from any occupied and not trespassing on private property, you just go into the desert and just shoot. We had a few 9mm pistols and a few .22 long rifles. I had these cool 25 round banana mags for my .22 that made them sort of look like AK-47s, at least in my young mind anyways. We had this great shooting spot we always went to. It had a few burned out car frames, old washers, bowling pins, and other assorted junk. A lot of people used this spot over the years, so there was always a good amount of junk to shoot at. My buddy bought this life-size cardboard cutout of Kathy Ireland from her store beer display. We had a lot of fun shooting that all to hell, trying to decapitate it with small rifles. Anyways, we've been there for a few hours just shooting and having a lot of fun. We noticed a dust cloud coming from the direction of the dirt road that leads into the spot. We stopped shooting and waited to see who was coming. Probably some people dumping junk here, which is illegal, or maybe other people coming to do some target practice or something like that. As I got closer, we could hear the bangs and clangs of a large pickup hauling something banging around on the dirt road. As they got closer, I saw that in the bed of their pickup, they were hauling a bright red bed of another pickup. Then I started getting a really bad feeling. My gut was telling me something wasn't right. I told my buddy to take the safety off his guns just in case. Something just wasn't right. These two guys get out of the truck and they look like the Hollywood stereotype of a gangbanger. They even talk like it too. They asked if we could help them take the bed they were hauling out of the bed of their pickup and set it up near the other junk. I told them I would help, but that my buddy was a bad shoulder and couldn't lift anything heavy anyways. I was lying to have an excuse to have him stay near our guns in case something happened. These guys were giving off really bad vibes. After we set the bed on its side against one of the burnt out car frames, one of the guys goes into his truck, then runs right up to the bed with a sawed-off double barrel and blam blam fires right at it. At this point, I was back at my buddy's truck with my .22 in hand, safety off, scared out of my mind. I was having a total fight or flight moment. Now, these guys never once indicated that they were bad guys or were going to do anything. It was just a gut feeling I was having before I even saw them. They said a few things to each other in Spanish, and then one of them says in English, "Yeah, I think this will work." They got in their truck and said, "Have fun shooting that thing, Holmes," and they drove off. We packed up and left as soon as we saw they were far off down the dirt road. I have a feeling they were going to use that sawed-off shotgun later on something other than a truck bed. They could have been gang members, maybe drug cartel members, human traffickers, who knows? I've never been so scared in my life. The bad feeling I got had me convinced we were going to get killed, or at the very least into a gunfight with these guys. We stopped going into the desert to shoot after that. I only go to shooting ranges now. I hope I never meet anyone like those guys again. Another weird camping experience. I was out with 4 other friends. We were aged in our late teens, going camping for one of their bachelor parties. We had spent all day hanging out, going on trails and jumping off of cliffs into waters. The girls there were quite fun, I might add. When it came time to actually camp for the night, we chose to a more off-road than the normal sites, for we would have had to pay fines and there were a lot of people, making it difficult to even find room. So we found a nice legal place to set up for the night, and that's what we did. A little backstory about the site that's important. It was basically the top of a hill, kind of a mini plateau, surrounded by lots of desert area, southern Arizona, and small brush. Not sure which direction, but to about a mile, probably less in one direction, was an abandoned building of sorts. It seemed like it used to be used for irrigation or some kind of growing of plants, and there was a wasp nest, so we avoided the area obviously. Still, an interesting thing to see. It looked like some kind of fancy-ass cabin in the middle of nowhere from the campsite. Anyways, fast forward to a few hours to when it's dark, and we're all sitting around the campfire playing Cards Against Humanity, a favorite of ours. And it's worthy to note that I was buzzing very hard off of a classic Cuban-style cigar, and was feeling sick due to that. Now, is now quite dark, and the only lights is really from the campfire or from our lamps and technology. Out of nowhere, one of us notices headlights going down the very specific trail that only leads to our campsite and the aforementioned abandoned structure. These headlights turn out to be a truck towing a trailer later on, and this vehicle was moving quite slow, which technically is understandable, but still unnerving. We started to speculate that it might be a park ranger or someone of the like. For the purpose of the rest of the story, I'll just refer to the vehicle as he, despite the fact that the gender of said vehicle's driver was never identified. He drove past the turn-off to our campsites and continued to structure where he parked and turned off his lights. At this point, we were genuinely concerned. From what I can remember, the next maybe half hour or so, the truck remained like so, not producing any light. This was especially bad, considering we were making lots of lights and noise and had no way to see if someone was approaching from the surrounding darkness except flashlights. After enough worry was upon us, we decided to try and check it out, so we all got up and began to stumble through the darkness, without flashlights as the maintained stealth, attempting to get closer to the truck. This entire time, I just wanted to sit down and lay down, and was feeling terrible to the buzz. After another half hour of doing this, I think, the truck headlights turned back on, and he proceeded to drive back up the trail and towards our campsite. Throughout this entire process, we stayed hidden far from the site. Upon reaching our site, someone got out of the truck, did something, and got back in. Because we heard a door slam shut, it was difficult to see what was happening. Then it backed out, which would have been hard as shit with a trailer late at night on a narrow-ass road, and left, going just as slow as before, and eventually getting out of sight. We returned to our site, trying to think things out, and when we again noticed the truck with its trailers driving noticeably slower than before, at which probably like 1 mile per hour, this was on a road further away from before, but still headed in the direction of where we were at this point, we were all genuinely freaked out, and didn't want to wake up in the middle of the night to something really bad happening, or fucking not wake up at all, to be honest. So we decided to pack up, leave, and go to one of our rental houses that was being used for the summer. That's the end of the story. I know, it's not that creepy or scary, but to me, that was really interesting, and the best thing I could think of that actually happened for this subreddit, to whoever the fuck was in that truck, let's not mean unless you were harmless or a park ranger, then stop being creepy and weird, please, man. The time a friend and I were almost trafficked. Hi all, Happy New Year. I want to start off by saying that everybody in the story is safe, but it was one of the closest calls I've ever had in my life, and I feel like I had to tell my story in order to raise awareness. I live in a major city in practically the pit of hell state. Born and raised here, I'm very familiar with my surroundings. I'm also aware to the fact that my city is one of the worst hubs for human trafficking, and living here can be very, very dangerous. Despite all this, I've taken pride in knowing that I do everything I can to remain as safe as possible. I've had close calls before. Shady landlord gives me stranger copies of my keys, and a man tried to enter as soon as I was alone, and other horrifying tales, and consider myself quite an avid avatar of this situation. I'm pretty prepped. At the time, I had 2 things of pepper sprays, one in my favorite jacket, another Velcro to my desk at work. I've also had 2 trusty pocket knives, one always on me, one in my car door pocket. Oh, my taser never leaves my bag. I avoid shady situations, and despite being a small lady, I know my stuff. Yay for self-defense classes. My point is, I'm a very paranoid small chihuahua, and I still got into a scary situation. On to the story. It is summer, and hot as hell out. I've got a date with my favorite gal pal, and I swing by her place to pick her up. She tells me she has a job interview to go to first, and I agree to go with her. No big deal. She's a tiny, sweet thing from a small town in the Midwest, and very new to city life, and the wild things that can happen here. As we drive into a different city, I ask her about the job. It's a modeling gig. Oh, cool, for who? I found an ad on Craigslist. It's just sports clothes. The Craigslist thing sets a small distant alarm off in my head, but I push it to the side. Where the heck are we going anyways? When we pull up to a Starbucks a bit outside of the city, the alarm bell in my head becomes a little less faint. Relax, I tell myself. I've got the legit job interviews at coffee shops before. There's always been a good reason. We arrive first, late still, but end up waiting about 15 minutes. Kind of weird. but Kat's relieved we're not the rude ones. When she gets a text saying he's here, I look around the Starbucks and outside of the parking lot, trying to figure out who the mystery man can be when I notice a tall, well-dressed man step out of a black SUV. He smiles at us as he approaches, and I figured that's our guy. I could have sworn the SUV had been parked there for a while. I ask Kat if she wants me to step in line and grab her a drink, but she practically begs me to stay with her. Okay, I can do that. I didn't think it looked very professional, but I didn't protest. The man named Jack leads us to an isolated table outside and doesn't say much about my presence, other than it was okay for me to be there. I get on my phone and shoot a text to my fiance, explaining where I was and what I was doing. He shoots back a "be careful," and I sit pretty to watch the show. Jack had this strange accent that I couldn't place my finger on. Looking back, I'm not even sure if it was real. He starts asking Kat the usual questions, and I notice she's absolutely bombing the interview. She doesn't have much experience and didn't bother to bring a portfolio, but despite this, he doesn't seem to care. The alarm in my head is much louder than a whisper, but it completely blares when he asks if she'd be comfortable doing lingerie shots as well. Dear sweet Kat says she doesn't have an issue with it, but would prefer to do mostly sports clothings, like they had discussed earlier. She asked to see some of his work, and he pulls up a lingerie Instagram. All lingerie, no clothing at all. He holds it in front of her face and pulls it away immediately. And once she asks if there was more she'd be doing, Jack goes, "That was it," and hurries the conversation along. He says we need to go right now to a studio at a place he briefly mentioned the name of to sign papers and get everything squared away. It has to be done today. He's not working tomorrow, and his coworkers won't do it right. I absolutely hate everything about this, and I'm trying to glare some sense into her, but nothing is getting through. Kat agrees, and he turns his attention to me. "Do you want to be a part of this too?" I immediately know that nothing about this is professional. I look down at my beat-up docs and green cargo pants, a shirt that has flames and a slightly edgy logo on it, and I can't help but scoff. That's not really my thing, I'm just a ride. He studies me for a second, and then says we can all ride with him, directing his attention to Kat. "No, I don't want to leave my car, we'll follow ya." He looks offended that I butt in, but asks where we parked. "Right in front of the store, I got it." I pull Kat to the Jeep and make sure we walk behind him. As soon as we get into the car, I lock the doors and try to keep from freaking out. "We are not going. This doesn't feel right. What about the lingerie?" Everything I say she has an excuse for. We pull out of the parking lot and I follow Jack's SUV, but the whole time I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this. Kat doesn't like the lingerie, but this could be a door for her, and she desperately needs the money. What if it is legit? He was alone anyways. "You have your knife and spray, right?" "Of course I do, but I'm 5'2", and this man's 6'3", and Jack could very much have friends, and I don't want to possibly kill or be killed. I realize Kat is batshit. We drive along as I try to talk to her, and we start driving out into the desert, the middle of absolute nowhere. There's a divider in the road that prevents U-turns, and I get an eerie feeling that Jack knew to take us this way. I'm absolutely desperate at this point. I pull up my phone and snap a picture of Jack's SUV's license plates. I upload it to Snapchat where my friends can see it. Kat starts getting uncomfortable once she realizes how far we've driven. The name of the place he mentioned springs back into my head, and I know it's familiar from somewhere, a commercial jingle that's distant but catchy. It's a restaurant or hotel or something. He wouldn't have a studio there. Please just look it up. So she does. It's a casino. Unless this man has rented out a space, he would not have a studio there. It's not consistent with the information he gave us at all. Kat is freaked out at this point. I tell her that it isn't uncommon, as he was trying to confuse us the entire time. Throughout the entire interview, she had a confused and hesitant look on her face, like this wasn't what she was promised or expecting at all. Kat finally agrees that we need to get out of there, and I start to breathe easy again. I notice that every 5 minutes or so, there's a break in the medians. It's a rough, quick stop and turnaround, but I'll have to do, so I do, and we absolutely fucking got it. Kat gets a call from Jack, and at first she ignores it. I convince her to call back, and she gets nothing at all, like the number had blocked her, it didn't go through. I tell her to screenshot the Craigslist ad, but she can't find it anywhere. It's like every trace of Jack disappeared. We go back to her apartment. I tell her she needs to report it. She promises she will, but later because she doesn't want her husband to know. He didn't even know she had this interview to begin with, and she didn't want him to know what happened. If I hadn't driven her, she would have gone alone without telling us all, and who knows what could have happened. I tried not to scold her too badly, but I just reminded her that our city was very different and much more dangerous than where she's from. Sweet cat, I hope you're a little more awakened to the world, and I'm sorry for that. It's been a few months since we split ways, and I'm still worried to death over all the obvious crazy things that you get into. Since the incidents, I have now 3 pepper sprays, I'm almost 4 months pregnant, and now finally ready to get out of this damn dangerous city. Please, 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 dear Redditor, to be safe out there. It's such a scary world, and be damn careful with Craigslist. Jack, if you're really the scary guy my gut deemed you to be, fuck you, man! And let's never meet again.